Welcome back to the Deep Dive, brought to you by Safety One Source, the place to be for safety and risk management pros who like to, stay ahead of the game. And today we're diving deep into something that could really, I think, change the way you approach safety. OSHA's Freedom of Information Act process.
FOIA.
FOIA. We've got articles, manuals, real-world examples, the whole 9 yards to help you unlock the secrets of this, pretty powerful tool, really.
Yeah. The interesting thing is most people think FOIA is just about getting those OSHA citations you hear about, the ones that make the news.
Right.
But it goes way beyond that, way deeper. We're talking inspection records, internal memos, even those safety data sheets you work with, like every day.
Exactly. I got to admit, when I started digging into this, I was kind of blown away by what you can actually access. Like, did you know even a condolence letter written by OSHA can, end up in a legal battle?
Yeah, it's true. Every FOIA request kind of walks this tightrope between transparency and privacy. It's this delicate balance. But before we get into the weeds, let's start with the basics. Lay the foundation.
Okay, so FOIA, let's unpack it. In a nutshell, what is it, and why should, our safety pros out there, why should they care?
Well, FOIA is basically a law that makes sure the government is being transparent, gives you the right to request access to, a whole lot of information held by federal agencies, including OSHA.
Okay, so for all of our listeners out there, this isn't just for lawyers or researchers, right? This is a tool you can use, really use, to get a handle on how OSHA works, what they're zeroing in on, and ultimately how to build a safer workplace.
Exactly. And the amount of info you can ask for is huge. We're talking everything from completed inspection reports to internal emails about safety standards. It's a gold mine waiting to be, mined, I guess.
Sounds almost too good to be true. But I'm guessing there are some catches, right? It can't be as easy as just asking for anything you want.
You're right. FOIA does have some, let's say, quirks. One of the big ones is the whole perfected request thing.
Okay, break that down for us. What makes a FOIA request, quote unquote, perfected?
It means you got to submit it the right way, using the proper channels. Think formal letters, faxes, or using OSHA's FOIA email. You can't just call them up and expect them to hand over everything.
So no casual chats with the OSHA inspector then?
Nope. And you got to be specific about what you want. A vague request like all documents related to chemical plant safety, that won't cut it. You need dates, locations, company names, incident numbers, if you have them.
Makes sense, like a laser focus instead of just wandering around in the dark. And I know this might seem obvious, but you can't ask OSHA to create new documents or hand over evidence from an investigation, right?
Exactly. They're there to give you access to what they already have, not to do your work for you.
Right. And what about costs? I imagine there's some, fees involved.
There can be for processing, copying, things like that. But a lot of times you can get those fees waived. Depends on why you need the info and what kind of organization you represent.
Okay, that's good to know, especially for, all of us working with tight budgets. Now, one thing that really jumped out at me when I was, prepping for this is that the type of case, open or closed, that makes a huge difference in what you can get.
Huge. Open cases, especially those with ongoing lawsuits, those are really hard to get info on.
Makes sense, I guess. OSHA's got to protect the investigation and all that legal stuff.
Exactly.
So let's say, I'm a safety pro and there's been a big incident at a competitor, something high profile. If the case is still open, am I out of luck?
You probably won't get the whole file while it's active, no. But even with open cases, some things are public, like citations and imminent danger notices.
So there's still some potential there.
Right.
What about closed cases, though? Once it's over, can I ask for anything and everything?
Well, not quite. There are these things called exemptions that decide what can be kept secret, even after a case is closed.
All right, this is where it gets interesting. Let's dig into those FOIA exemptions. What are they and why do they even exist?
There's 9 total, but some are way more relevant to safety pros than others. Number 4 is a big one, protects confidential business info, trade secrets, that kind of thing.
So even if it's about safety, it could still be off limits if it gives one company a leg up over another.
Right. Companies need to protect their sensitive safety data, and FOIA gets that. Then there's Exemption 5, which covers attorney-client privilege and internal stuff within OSHA, like why you might not see every email or internal memo.
So it's not just about companies, but also about, making sure government agencies can do their jobs.
Yep. And probably the most important exemption, at least for our listeners, is a combo of 7C and 7D.
All right, what do those focus on?
People. 7C is about personal privacy. So employee names, witness info, medical stuff, that's usually blacked out.
Makes sense. You wouldn't want that out in the open.
Right. And 7D protects anyone who gave OSHA info confidentially, whistleblowers, witnesses who are afraid of, retaliation, anyone who was promised anonymity.
So even in a closed case, some things are still redacted to protect people's identities and all that.
Yeah. It's all about finding that balance, transparency versus protection.
I see. So with all these exemptions, what can we actually get? Like really get? Let's talk real world stuff here. Let's start with something everyone deals with, safety data sheets. Can you snag those through FOIA?
It depends. If the SDS came straight from the employer, it's probably considered confidential business info and protected under that exemption 4. But if the CSHO, the OSHA inspector, got that SDS on their own, like from a third party, then it's probably fair game.
So knowing where that SDS came from, that's key.
Huge detail for safety pros to keep in mind. And same logic applies to like photos and videos. Employer gives it to OSHA, probably confidential. OSHA takes them during an inspection. Might be accessible, although they might blur faces for privacy.
Speaking of privacy, what about condolence letters? The ones OSHA writes to families after a fatality.
Those are tricky. The family can usually get them, but if a third party asks, that's when privacy concerns come in.
So protecting not just the person who died, but also the family's privacy.
Yeah, and this is important for anyone using FOIA documents. Pay attention to the redaction justifications, the reasons why things are blacked out.
Those little notes explaining why stuff's missing.
Exactly. Those can be super helpful. They give you a peek into OSHA's thought process, help you figure out what they usually protect.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of FOIA. Open versus closed cases, those tricky exemptions. But how do you actually navigate this whole process? Walk us through it.
First step, formal written request. Be as specific as possible, include dates, locations, names, case numbers, everything you've got. Then figure out the fees, and if you can, get a waiver.
So it's not just about what to ask for, but the whole administrative side too.
Yep. Once you submit it, OSHA has 20 working days to respond. But there can be delays. Sometimes big ones.
What kind of delays are we talking about?
Could be a huge request or just, bureaucracy. And if they say no, don't give up. You can appeal.
So there's hope even if they shut you down at first.
Absolutely. You can also talk to OSHA's FOIA public liaison or the Office of Government Information Services. They can help. Remember, FOIA is about transparency, so don't be afraid to use it. It's your right.
We've covered a lot in this first part of our FOIA deep dive. And in part 2, we'll be switching gears from the how-to to the so what. We'll get into the practical stuff, how safety pros are actually using FOIA to get insights, benchmark against competitors, even get a glimpse into what's coming next in safety.
It's going to be good. Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive, brought to you by Safety One Source. Still digging into OSHA's Freedom of Information Act. And in this part, we're shifting gears a bit. We've talked about what FOIA is, the nuts and bolts, the process, all that. Now, let's talk about why this matters, like really matters for safety pros.
Yeah, if you think about it, FOIA gives you access to a ton of real-world data, straight from OSHA. Stuff they've gathered from actual inspections, investigations, all that. It's like peeking behind the curtain, seeing how they operate, what they prioritize.
Super valuable, right?
Right.
But I think some folks might still be wondering, okay, so I can request this info, but what do I do with it? How do I actually use it to, improve my safety game?
Great question. One of the most common ways is benchmarking. So let's say you're putting together a new safety program or updating an old one. Instead of starting from scratch, you can use FOIA to see what other companies are doing, especially in your industry.
So I could request inspection records from similar facilities, like even my competitors.
Yeah.
See what OSHA was looking at, what violations they found, how those issues were fixed.
Exactly. Learn from their mistakes and their successes. By seeing what tripped others up, you can head off those problems in your own programs.
It's like getting a sneak peek at OSHA's playbook.
Yeah.
Right. And this isn't just about avoiding fines. It's about figuring out best practices.
Absolutely. Let's say you're researching a specific hazard, right? Or how to control something. You can use FOIA to see what other companies are doing, even outside your industry, to manage that risk. Broaden your horizons, see what the real leaders in safety are doing.
Love that. Thinking outside the box. Now, we've talked about being proactive, but what about after something happens? Can FOIA help with incident analysis?
For sure. Say there's been an incident, serious one, or even a near miss. Instead of just relying on your own internal investigation, use FOIA to see what OSHA found in similar incidents.
I can see how that would be helpful. Understanding what caused those incidents, what went wrong, how OSHA handled it, could help us find weaknesses in our own processes, even improve our own investigations.
Exactly. Like having a second opinion from the experts and access to like this huge database of real-world examples.
Okay, so benchmarking, best practices, incident analysis. But there's one more application of FOIA that I think is really cool, uncovering industry trends.
That's a big one. By looking at a bunch of FOIA data, safety pros can start to see things like emerging risks or patterns, either in their own industry or even across different ones.
Like predicting the future of safety?
Sort of. It's about shifting from just reacting to things to anticipating what's coming next, being proactive.
This is all great, but I got to ask, isn't this super time-consuming? Wading through all those documents, it sounds like a full-time job in itself.
It can be, yeah, but the payoff can be huge. And don't forget about technology. There's software out there specifically designed to help you search, organize, and analyze FOIA data.
So it's not just about brute force, it's about working smarter, right? Using tech to filter by keywords, industry, type of violation, anything you need.
Exactly. The point is, FOIA gives you the raw material. You got to use your skills, your knowledge of safety to make sense of it all.
It's not just about getting the info, it's about using it to make real changes, build a better safety program, and, a safer workplace overall.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, FOIA is always changing. OSHA's always releasing new stuff, updating policies, dealing with new challenges. So you got to stay in the loop, adapt your strategies as you go.
We've covered a lot in this episode, but we're not done yet. In our final part, we're going to bring it all home with some real-life case studies. You'll see how companies just like yours have used FOIA to get real results, make a real difference. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Deep Dive, brought to you by Safety One Source. All right, in this final part of our FOIA journey, we're going to get down to brass tacks. We've talked theory, we've talked how-to, but now it's time to see FOIA in action. Real-world stuff.
Yep, we're diving into case studies. Stories about companies, just like yours, using FOIA to make things better, improve their safety, protect their workers, maybe even get ahead of the competition.
These stories are pretty inspiring, honestly. I think they'll really show our listeners what's possible. So let's jump into it. Yep. Tell me about a time when FOIA, really made a difference.
Okay, picture this. Safety manager at a manufacturing plant. Let's call her Sarah. She's got to improve their lockout-tagout procedures after a close call, a real nail-biter that shook everyone up.
Lockout-tagout, that's serious stuff. Could mean life or death. So, yeah, I bet Sarah was feeling the pressure.
Big time. But she doesn't just slap a Band-Aid on it. She wants to do it right, understand what works, what doesn't, and what OSHA's really focused on.
So she turns to FOIA.
Bingo. Sarah submits a request to OSHA, asks for inspection records from other manufacturers, places where they had lockout-tagout violations. Figured if she knew what got other companies in trouble, she could find the weak spots in her own program.
Smart move. So what did she find?
Well, as she's going through these records, she starts noticing some patterns. A lot of the violations, they were about training. Workers not getting proper training on the specific lockout-tagout procedures for their machines.
Ah, yeah, that's a common one. It's easy to assume everyone knows what to do, but without the right training, the documentation, mistakes happen.
Right. And then there were issues with the procedures themselves, the written steps, either too vague or the workers couldn't easily get to them when they needed them.
Makes sense. Those procedures got to be crystal clear. So training and procedures, anything else?
Oh, yeah. The third thing Sarah found was a lot of companies messed up identifying all the energy sources. Missed a hidden one, didn't think about stored energy, stuff like that.
Yikes. That's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. So Sarah takes all this info, all these lessons from other companies' mistakes, and she takes a hard look at her own program. She revamps the training, makes it hands-on, specific to their equipment, rewrites those procedures, simple language, clear diagrams, and makes sure everyone can find them. And she puts in a super strict process for finding and controlling all those energy sources, no more guessing games.
So she basically used FOIA to turn other companies' screw-ups into a win for her company.
Pretty much. And it worked. Not only did Sarah's company avoid any lockout-out violations during their next OSHA inspection, but the inspector was really impressed, commended them for being proactive, for having such a thorough program.
That's awesome. Shows that FOIA isn't just about dodging fines. It's about building a real safety culture, going above and beyond.
Couldn't agree more. It's about using this information to be a leader, not just following the rules. Okay, ready for another case study. Let's switch gears. Different industry, different challenge. Construction this time. We've got a safety consultant, let's call him Mark. He's brought in by a construction company, got to help them get a handle on fall hazards.
Falls in construction, that's a big one. Major cause of fatalities. Mark's got his work cut out for him.
You said it. And he knows that to make a real difference, he's got to understand how OSHA tackles fall protection, what they're looking for, what kind of violations pop up the most. So what does he do? Turns to FOIA.
Makes sense. Why reinvent the wheel when OSHA's already done so much work in this area? What's his strategy?
He sends a FOIA request to OSHA, wants those inspection records from construction sites where they had fall protection citations. He's looking for the whole picture types of violations, the details of what happened, the fall protection systems they were using, even how OSHA worded those citations.
He's really digging deep, trying to get into OSHA's head, huh?
Yep. Looking for patterns, trends, anything that can give him an advantage when he's building a fall protection plan for his client. And as he goes through it all, a few things jump out. One, OSHA's laser focused on fall protection training. Lots of companies getting cited for skimping on training or not keeping good records.
Training, it's always training, right?
Yeah.
Got to make sure people know how to use the equipment, understand the risks.
For sure. Another thing, how they're using harnesses and lanyards. OSHA's checking for damaged equipment, if it fits right, if the anchor points are correct. And finally, those anchor points themselves. Companies are getting nailed for using weak anchor points or not having a good system for checking and maintaining them.
So basically all the essential parts of a solid fall protection program. He's getting a checklist straight from OSHA, thanks to FOIA.
Exactly. So Mark takes all this knowledge and builds a custom fall protection plan for the construction company. Training program, top-notch, fully documented, equipment inspection and maintenance, locked down tight, anchor points, carefully chosen, installed perfectly, and inspected regularly.
Sounds like he really knows his stuff.
Oh, yeah. And the construction company, they're thrilled. They see he's not just throwing generic solutions at them, he's tailored it to their needs based on what OSHA's actually doing out in the field.
A win for everyone. The company gets a great fall protection program, and Mark gets a reputation as a safety consultant who really delivers.
Right. These case studies, they show what FOIA can do. It's not just about data, it's about using that data to make things better, safer. Whether you're comparing yourself to others, fixing your own programs, or spotting trends, FOIA can be a game changer for any safety pro.
Totally agree. All right, as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave everyone with this. Don't be scared of FOIA. It's your tool. Explore OSHA's website, learn how it works, and start digging into all that safety gold.
And remember, you're not alone. There's help out there. OSHA's FOIA public liaison, the Office of Government Information Services, or even a safety consultant who's used FOIA before.
And a big thanks to Safety One Source for bringing you this deep dive. They're your one-stop shop for all things safety with training, consulting, and products to help you build a safer workplace.
Check them out at safetyonesource.com. Tons of great resources there.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe.